Hey guys, it's your girl Kayla once again coming to you with another exclusive interview. And today I'm sitting with the incomparable George Tillman Jr., who's been responsible for some of our absolute favorite movies, some of the most important movies in our community. You know him from Barbershop Trilogy, Men of Honor, Beauty Shop, one of my personal favorites. And I'm here today to talk to him about a new film, The Hate U Give. That's based on one of our favorite books by Angie Thomas. I have a book club, and we just finished it actually a few months ago.
Great.
Actually. So it's definitely been a hot topic over the last few months. And just talk to us a little bit about what it's like to translate a film based on a book, especially one that's about a social topic that is so important right now in our community.
Well, it's always important. I always love telling stories that's very inspiring. I felt the same way when I read Angie Thomas' book, The Hate U Give. I got the book very early before it was published, and then when it was published, it went to #1 for it still is, I think, somewhere in 70 weeks or something like that. It's a very powerful book about a young girl named Star who has to navigate herself between two worlds, the inner city world that she lives in with her family, or the white world where she goes to a private school in a suburban neighborhood. So she's able to go back and forth and code switch. And the movie and the story is about her confronting her identity after she witnessed the death of her childhood friend named Khalil. That is a very important subject matter that's very relevant today. But also what I love how the book deals with race, and I love how it deals with relationships and how we must learn to respect and love one another. It's a very inspiring story. So as a filmmaker, I try to stay very true to the adaptation. And that was just having Angie Thomas, the author, nearby. And every time when we would work on the script or in terms of casting and just making sure we capture the spirit.
Right. And that actually goes into the next question I was going to ask you about, how do you maintain the integrity of the story that the author told and kind of stay away from the idea that, or not be distracted by the idea that the book is always better than the movie? Is that something that you even think about? How do you kind of combat that notion?
Well, I think the key for me was really try to hold on to the spirit, to the book as much as possible. I think the first thing is, as a filmmaker, is I felt like when she wrote the book, it was really about African Americans and African American culture and how this authentic take can be universal by being authentic to ourselves. So a lot of the experience and the things that's in the book I was able to relate to as an African American man growing up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, growing up and being an African American director working in Hollywood. So all these things, I felt like it was inside of me, but the key was really utilizing Angie and really going through all the characters, understanding what their backstory, what each character really wanted, going through the structure and talking about what character can go, what characters can I keep together, and keeping the spirit. Her biggest thing that she had in the book was the spirit of Tupac, and his philosophy, the thug philosophy that he created in 93 and 94. And using that and intertwine that in the story. That was a huge thing for me, because it's a huge thing in the book. So the key for that is really being a great partner, and that's what Angie really was.
Awesome. And now, right now in our country, there's a conversation that's always being had about police brutality all the time. And one of the biggest conversations that people are having right now is the discussion between the topic of Nike and their decision to endorse Colin Kaepernick on his stance with police as it relates to police brutality. Now, a lot of people are saying that really wasn't a move that they made because they're standing on, on his side, but more so as a financial move for them, to make profit. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that is a topic that's is a huge divide. It's a big conflict. So for a corporation to take that risk and not going for 100%, where you feel like everybody's on the same frame of mind, it shows a little bit of a risk taker for them regardless. So I really believe the ideal of what Colin represents into society is really what Star represents in the movie, which is stand up for what you believe in, stand up for what you believe is right, be authentic to yourself. And even if that's a sacrifice, and I feel like Colin made a huge sacrifice for the community and for the rights of people and human being in general. And that is something that you applaud. So if anybody find recognition or recognize that, I think that's a great thing. Just imagine 10 years ago, nobody would have done and stood up for anything. So we are in the process. It's not overnight, but the process of recognizing that, you know, these issues are out there.
You know, the main character of the movie, Star, is a young girl, a teenage girl. And, you know, usually when terrible incidents like these happen, we don't hear the perspective of the child all the time. We don't necessarily hear the perspective of perhaps the child of the father who may have been gunned down, or, you know, the nieces and nephews, the younger generation. Why was it so important, you know, being that this book is about Star, why was it so important for you to put her character on the big screen?
I think it was very important because several things, but the major, we never really have a point of view from a child or a teenage perspective, especially a 16-year-old African-American woman. That is some huge stakes of a 16-year-old girl who's having identity issues in terms of not believing and not standing up for what she believed in, but she witnessed a murder, she witnessed the police brutality, she is the witness, she is threatened not to speak about because of the street element that's in her neighborhood. Mm-hmm. She has the pressure of her friends. That's a lot for someone to take on their shoulders. That would make the story so original in terms of a beautiful take, because you have this child who's innocent and there's still a future ahead for all these things to come. I think that was the really most refreshing thing for me as a filmmaker. The second most important thing is we don't get to know the relationships of individuals who have passed away, you know, like Philando Castile in Minnesota. I mean, this is a young man who had a family, who was, you know, he was a father, and we don't see the pressures and the conflicts or the obstacles that the family goes through. And the best thing is, instead of having sympathy, is having empathy and understanding. And that's really what, it was very important to have a 16-year-old African-American woman as the protagonist for this story.
Now, as you kind of created her character, I'm sure you had the opportunity to speak with some of the families of, you know, some of the hashtags, you know, the Eric Garners, and I know you even had the opportunity to speak with the estate of Emmett Till. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about those moments? And I mean, how did you even go about that?
Well, the main thing was, you know, Angie had them in the book.
Right.
So to use their pictures and to use, you know, their names in the film, you had to get permission. So very early on, you know, I wanted to reach out to Eric Garner's family and Sandra Bland.
Right.
And that conversation was explaining what the movie was about. And a lot wasn't really said in terms of what happened to them. That was very, I understood that. You can just hear in their voice the pain, and more so that, wow, this is really real. Because you see this on TV all the time, but when it affects you, or when it affects, or you one person removed, or you actually on the phone with a family member, it just made everything in terms of what I was doing feel more significant, real, and a lot of responsibility. And also, you know, Fox reached out to the Emmett Till estate. They have always been very open throughout the years, but just wanted to reach out and just wanted to let us know that Emmett Till is breathing and still living, the spirit inside the material. And it's not so the movie is all about that, because the movie is very inspiring and motivating. You're going to want to get out, but we are a vessel for individuals who have lived through these things, and to show the world that that these are families, these are brothers and sisters, and we are all in it all together, and that's what THUG really means when Tupac really coined that phrase.
Yeah, and I think that the story really talks about how when these things happen, how they impact our community. And you know, a young lady like Star, after experiencing something like that, she's forever changed. You know, her outlook on life is forever changed. So what do you hope that young people who come to see this film, who may live in these inner city communities, who may have experienced similar things, or just have seen, you know, there's so many youth that have seen so many horrible things that a lot of people in our country cannot even fathom, in truth.
Yeah.
What do you hope they take away from this movie? Because a lot of them are angry. A lot of them deal with what they've experienced through anger.
Yeah, and I think the key is really what the spirit of Star, and her father says he named her Star because she's a lightness in the darkness, and that's what really we must keep in mind, is that one voice can make a difference, and it starts within yourself. If you got something to say, if you believe in something, don't be afraid to say it. Don't be afraid to stand up. We have social media, we have organizations, we have a lot of people who want to make change, people of all color. How we be able to do that? By having conversations, by talking, by realizing we're seeing and understanding biasm or racism. How do we combat and not let things go? That is the start, and to do that is to be able to have a conversation and be able to realize and not stay quiet. And I think that's really what the importance of being able to move forward.
All right, now before I let you go, you've become extremely successful movie director, and I always, whenever I talk to people like you in your position, I always like to give them an opportunity to say to those who are watching, some words of encouragement. People who may who aspire to do what you're doing or aspire to be into the entertainment industry. What's some nuggets of wisdom that you can give them to kind of keep them pushing?
I think the most important thing, for young people out there who wants to pursue film or music or any types of art, that's really where the parameters where I work in as a filmmaker. The most important thing I would say is just find your own story. Find out what's important to you. Everybody has originality inside them. For me, I always wanted to be a filmmaker at a very early age. What was my story? So I just took what was very important to me, which was Soul Food, which was my first film. Yes. And that was something that I was able to relate to, and I felt like no one could tell that story better than me. Now, am I the best writer in the world? I have some of the worst grammar you can ever think of, but I had the story there, and I actually had a beginning, middle, and end, and it was me, and it was personal for me. And that was that's something I won't be able to point out to a lot of young individuals. And that's what people that I meet every day. Like when I worked on the film Notorious, that was a film that Cheo Coker and the Wallace family wanted done. As a filmmaker, I was a vessel for that. But again, they had their story, a story that no one else could tell but them, and I was a part of that process. So don't be afraid. Find who you are, find what makes you tick, and be able to relate that in the arts and relate that into your everyday work.
All right, well, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sitting down and talking to us a little bit. We're so excited for this movie to hit theaters and everyone to see it and be talking about it. And just thank you again.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.